Stéphen or Stephen?
As you want. It can be Stéphen.
Stéphen, is that how?
I accept any way to say it because I'm traveling a lot. In Spain, can be Esteban, and in South America, in Greece, it can be Stéphanos, and Steve in US. I don't care so much.
Okay. So I brought you on to talk about a recent paper, 2,000 years of garden urbanism in the upper Amazon, and it's written by yourself, and your last name is Rostain.
Yeah.
Stéphen Rostain et al. 2024. It's a very interesting paper because in it you present LIDAR data. And for those that don't know, light detection and ranging data, which creates very high resolution 3D renderings of the ground.
Yeah.
You presented data of LIDAR gathered in the Upano Valley of Ecuador.
Yeah.
And it revealed this huge network. I wrote down some notes before this. You scanned 300 kilometers squared, and you found a host of large, low-density agrarian urban systems. Where did I see the numbers, though? You found a large 2,000-year-old city that appears to have flourished in this valley in Ecuador. Can you tell me a little bit about how you initially got onto this project? And I did a little bit of reading about regarding the press releases from your paper.
Yeah.
And I recall reading that you actually did field work in the area of Ecuador early on, and you noticed these mounds in the Amazon rainforest.
Yeah, the story is a very long story of half a century, more or less, because in the 70s, a priest named Botasso saw some mounds. It was the Upano Valley at this time, mainly indigenous people living there. Very few Western people, basically priests that began to collect their soul, trained to do it. And met another colleague, another priest, and he said to the priest, because he knew that he did like archaeology. At this time, in the 70s, there was no archaeology in Ecuadorian Amazon, almost nothing.
And we want to clarify, this is 1970s.
No, yeah, 1970s, yeah. And he said to the other priest that he saw this mount. So the other priest said, "Oh, I want to see that." So they went together to the site, and the other priest was fascinated by these huge mounds, rectangular mounds, very high, up to 10 meters high. So he came back to Quito saying, "Oh, I found mounds." Yeah. Okay. And he began to organize an excavation. But he has not the background for excavation. So he made, during 2-3 years, some excavation with students of the university, because everybody knew that he did like archaeology. But in fact, he did publish a book after that, but very difficult to read because, you see, not very scholar, not very academic contribution. So the project was forgotten, and the site was forgotten. I came back in 1995 with an Ecuadorian archaeologist, and we began a new project, but a real scientific project. And I did stay 7 years excavating there. My Ecuadorian colleagues left after 2 years. I had another one, so the team was changing. But I made excavation in this valley during 7 years. And after that, I went in another place in French Guiana, in the Amazon, because I'm working 40 years in the Amazon, so I'm not always at the same place. And when I came back in 2011, I made a new project more to the north, and I met a specialist of LIDAR. And he asked me where I can make some LIDAR. I say it would be great to do it in the Upano Valley. I gave to him many documentation, maps, saying that we know some mounds, but not all the mounds. So it would be interesting to have a very precise map of this region. And he got a grant from the National Institute for Heritage, who paid for a large-scale LIDAR mapping on 600 square kilometers. That's a huge territory. And LIDAR is just like a trowel. It's just a tool. So you have you have really to work on the imagery after that with specialists.
Mm-hmm.
So they made a first contribution, but nothing was published. And I got the imagery by the National Center for Heritage. They gave to me in 2001 all the basic data. And we worked with a specialist named Antoine d'Horizon, 2 years to see something.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to make filters. We have all kind of technology because at the base, the LIDAR, what it is, it's laser, thousands of laser, and some of these laser are going through the vegetation up to the field. So by computer system, you can erase the vegetation and you see exactly the modeling of the superficie, and you can see when mounds, guts, all kind of things. But to be sure that it's some anthropic feature, you have generally when they are very geometrical, they can be anthropic, but the best is to go to the field. But in this case, generally like that archaeologists are working. I made the field work before to get the imagery, and what was fascinating during these 2 years of studying the data, it's I knew very well the parts of the valley, Upano Valley, and each day I was seeing the LIDAR imagery that is beautiful, and I know this mound. I was on this mound.
Yeah.
I could interpret better some guts, for instance, that are agricultural drainage or all kind of small features, not only mounds, but I knew by my excavation that they were, and I also some pictures made under the forest. So we can work with my fieldwork knowledge and the data, the imagery, the LIDAR imagery. So it was a fascinating discovery that because I thought before that there were some hundreds of mounds in the valley. I was completely wrong. There are not hundreds. There are thousands of mounds. And in fact, we when we publish in Science, we made half of the job, 300 square kilometers, and now we have finished 600 square kilometers. So we have much more mounds. In total, we have 6,400 mounds, and we have 85 kilometers of dug roads. So it's a complete anthropogenic landscape, completely transformed by pre-Columbian people. And I made a very large series of datings also during my excavations. And now I have a better chronology than when I did publishing in Science. Science, I say 2000, but in fact, it was 2,500. But for a title, it was not good to put 2,500.
Oh.
So I decided
make a nice science title.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided to take the lower probability. In fact, I have now datings of 3,000 years ago.
Okay.
So because in 600 AD, this culture, this civilization disappeared completely. We don't know exactly why.
600 AD. Yeah, that's an interesting timing.
Yeah, because it's during what we call the medieval climatic anomaly.
That would technically be a little bit before that. The medieval climate anomaly is more like 900 AD, 1,000. And maybe And globally, that's generally the accepted time.
I know 600, 700 in fact, what the data that I saw, but perhaps you're right. But it's true that in 600, I have no more dating in the valley.
Yeah.
So
That's
between 600 and 800 AD, there is no dating in the valley. In 800, we have another culture that is coming in the valley, completely different. They use the mounds, but they didn't make the mounds. So it's a new culture that use the opportunity to be in a higher place on the mounds. So and I found during my excavation complete archaeological soil of this culture that I call Wapula culture.
and this is the one that's at post dating 680.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to get into, maybe we'll call it the collapse of the Upano Valley culture later on in the talk. But first, before that, I kind of want to start broadly a little bit, because what got me originally interested in your study and this idea of these lost cities in the Amazon, it goes back to a couple of things. I'm a geologist, so I'm not an archaeologist, but I do study a lot of Holocene climate change, and I use proxies to study human environmental interactions. So I have some experience in the literature and what have you. But it was Charles Mann's book, 1491, which really opened my eyes to the world right before Christopher Columbus sails to Hispaniola in 1492. Charles Mann attempts to summarize what had happened in the pre-Columbian North and South America right up to that point of contact. And the one thing that stood out to me was, in the early 1500s, sailors off the coast of the Americas, the East Coast, noticed fires as far as the eye could see, and they could find barely any place as a safe harbor. And just a century later, in the 1600s, many of these places were pretty much abandoned or deserted, likely because of diseases. So there was this rapid population collapse on a scale maybe we underestimated. But more relevant to Ecuador, the early explorers in the Amazon, the early Europeans that showed up there, made it up the river, they talk about these huge populations they encountered in these landscaped, perfectly manicured landscapes, and large amounts of agriculture. In the recent literature in the West, among academics, a lot of the people discounted their accounts as exaggerations. For economic reasons, often you'll hear or you'll read in books that, they probably exaggerated these claims because they wanted to prove that their journey was worthy. There's gold there, there's economic opportunity there, invest here, bring money here. So we got to have some incentive to exaggerate. But it turns out, with your research and going with other people's work, that they may not have been exaggerating.
This is true. And there's one thing: the Upano culture was between 1000 BC up to 600, so 1600 years. That is like Roman Empire, more or less.
Right.
So it's very long. But at the time, it's one of the first, I would say up to now, it's the first city, the oldest city, the city of the Amazon. It's true that from 1000, 1200, another proto-urbanism began, completely different, began in certain parts of the Amazon. The first to see that was the US archaeologist Mike Eckenberger, who did study the proto-urbanism in the upper Xingu. And at this time, too, all the archaeologists were laughing about this, such incredible discovery. But he was right. And so we had another lecture of another reading of the Orellana book, because we are speaking basically on the Orellana book. Francisco de Orellana did organize in 1541 an expedition to the west to look for canal trees in the Amazon, and looking for gold also. This is an expedition who, during during was along the Amazon. They were not in the Upano Valley. They were more to the north. So they never saw the Upano. And anyway, the Upano cities were collapsed at this time for one millennium. So they went on the Napo River, but they didn't have enough to eat. A part of the soldiers, there were 200 soldiers, like 60 soldiers, went along the Napo to the west, looking for food, but they could not come back. So Francisco de Orellana continued up to the Amazon and up to the Atlantic. So he made a trip of 9 months along the very slow, along the Amazon, and he saw these big cities along the Amazon. And he said at a certain time, if you throw an arrow in the sky, it will forcefully fall on an Indian because they were so numerous. So he did arrive, the Carvajal, the priest, they did arrive after in Spain, but they were afraid of the Queen reaction because they left their captain in the forest. They never come back. Many persons say, oh, they exaggerate to don't be killed by the Queen. So they exaggerate. And nobody trusts what they said. They only trust one thing, and it's very funny. They trust the Amazon warriors, the female Amazon warriors. That is a completely legend, was trusted in Spain at this time, but not the existence of cities.
Wait, so say that again. So people in France accepted the Amazon wild?
In
Spain accepted. Say that again.
At a certain time, at the end of their trip, when they are in the lower Amazon, they saw a very big troop of soldiers with 12 chiefs that were female chiefs. So they immediately said, oh, they are Amazon.
I got it. I have it.
And for that reason, the Amazon River is called Amazon River. It's the river of female warriors.
Wow.
And from that, the legend of the Amazonian Amazon began. And during 4 centuries, this legend was trust everywhere. But it's not true. They were not. It's funny because after them, many authors wrote with some crunchy details. Or they're naked. They use men as sexual slaves, or they did invent so much things about these warriors that did not exist. We have no proof of that. They could have existed, but we have no proof. And nobody trusts the cities, especially because 1 century after, the Amazon was colonized long after Mexico or the Andes. Long after. 2 centuries after the contact, the first colonization began in the Amazon. And when the first colonial people did arrive, they saw no cities. So everybody said, okay, Orellana was a liar because there's no city. Why there is no city? You said it a few minutes ago. The disease killed everybody in very few years.
Very few years. That's the thing that's amazing to me.
In less than 1 century, cities were destroyed. It's 2 centuries after, nobody saw them because they were cities made of wood. Right. So there is no traces. Hopefully, they were not only made of wood, but also they have some remains of these cities along the Amazon with what we call the Terra Preta, the dark earth.
Mm-hmm.
Dark, anthropogenic dark earth, AD. That were excavated by the Brazilian archaeologist Eduardo Neves in between 2000 and 2010. And we know now that this Terra Preta is a result of a high occupation, high demography on the same place during a long time. So we have some remains of these cities, but no more. They don't. We have some mounds, earth mounds, artificial mounds, but not so much. So it's difficult to from the point of view of the archaeologist to see urban development along the Amazon. But probably it was, because we have one testimony of that, and we have no reason to not trust Gaspar de Cabral, the priest, that perhaps exaggerated a little bit, but not on the cities. And these cities were probably very similar to the cities excavated by Mike Eckenberger in the Xingu. In Bolivia, we have another proto-urbanism system. But these cities from Bolivia, from southwest and south of the Amazon, of Amazonia, are different, are more recent than the Upano Valley. Upano Valley is really not proto-urbanism, true full urbanism. It's incredible. In some cities, we have more than 700 artificial mounds, rectangular artificial mounds. You can imagine. Then we have main avenues, axial avenues along 1 kilometer or 2 kilometers long, perfectly straight. So we have all kind of manifestations that correspond to real urbanism, a low density urbanism, but urbanism.
Very interesting. Now I
We
hear
have a very dense occupation of the valley. Basically, they move everywhere earth to dig canals, to dig drainage, to dig roads and trails, and to make mounds, to make ditches. We have all kinds of features that we can see better on the LIDAR imageries, and in the field is not so easy to see these features, because you have vegetation. It's kind of difficult.
I could only imagine in the Amazon rainforest. And so when I'm hearing urbanism, and you call it garden urbanism, and it's in the middle of, up in that valley, what were they growing and facilitating? Because you mentioned canals to support those kind of populations.
Yeah, this is garden cities is not. It's a word, a name known for almost 1 century by urbanism people. It was used first time by Mike in the Upper Xingu, and I use this word first because it's not necessary to change always a good name. Use and very significant name. I know that in the media they like new words, but sometimes you can use an old good name. And it's exactly what we have. We have a perfect checkerboard organization, because we have street in orthogonal organization, avenue, street, and mounts along the streets. So it's like New York, basically, without Fifth Avenue. But it's like it's the same kind of map, not so regular, but it's kind of incredible, no? And in the empty space, for that reason, they are called also low density cities, because they have a lot of space. They are not glued like in Western cities. In the empty spaces, they cultivated with what we call a drainage fields, that are small drainage, because it's always a little bit muddy. It's very rainy, so it's always muddy. So if you cultivate, it's not perfect, especially if you cultivate maize. And I know by my excavations that they were cultivating maize. So you have to dry a little bit the mud. So this drainage was perfect to do that. We have the same kind of drainage, exactly the same kind of drainage in the Maya territory. It's very similar. And today, some indigenous continue to make, not in the Upano, but in Venezuela, to make this kind of drainage. So they did cultivate large space, and also in checkboard. You see, it's like polders. You see, small drainage. They are like that. They are not so wide. And because you can imagine, with thousands of mounds, you need food. So they had to cultivate everywhere. They were cultivating by drainage field, but not only. They on the small hills, they made terraces. They also made raised fields in other places. So everywhere they did cultivate. Every free space was used for agriculture. And probably it was not enough. You can imagine during 1,600 years, no animals to hunt in this region. Probably they were trading animals with other tribes. They were probably using also a lot of fishes because we have a big river. The bed of the Upano River is like between 500 and 1 kilometer wide. So it's a big river. So probably they could have sometimes some problems for food. And perhaps this is the origin of the collapse with a season, climatic change.
Hello, everyone. If you're watching this video and you enjoy, please consider subscribing to this channel or liking the video. It will help me support science communication across the internet. Let's change the game.
Putting drying the boat, a strong drought can destroy such society. We have the same case in other places in the Amazon. We have the same case in Maya lowlands where strong climatic stress can destroy a very hierarchical, strong, dense society. And the other aspect that I would like to say, it's why there we had such city and not in other places in the Amazon. Up to now, we didn't find a comparable, similar city in the Amazon. I would say it's when times met geography. 3,000 years ago, it's when cities began in the Americas, in Mesoamerica, in the Andes, in the Pacific coast of South America, the first cities began to appear. This is a good time. And place, geography, you have to the west the Andes, and you have to the east a small cordillera called Kutuku. And the Upano Valley is a very straight and narrow valley of 20 kilometers wide, going along tens of kilometers to the south. It is parallel to the Andes, and it's kind of isolated, privileged valley. So probably because we are at the foot of a big volcano called Sangai, 3,800 meters high. We have a lot of ashes in the earth, and it's the local farmers, modern farmers, say to me that they can get 3 times a year maize.
Really?
Yeah, so it's very fertile.
And this is tropical in weather, you would describe?
Yeah. Very
wet.
tropical.
Now, as you describe this origin of cities in the Americas, what comes to mind to me is, and maybe an analogy that people could help make them understand. So you're saying this is one of the earliest cities in the area, and could it have been like the equivalent of like Rome of that part of South America, where, do you know how as Rome's influence expanded across Europe, the architecture sort of changed to mimic that which was in Rome, and it kind of set the stage for urbanism for like the next 2,000 years? Would you say this city was like the inspiration for some of the urbanism that came out of the Andes later in the
difficult to say. You see, you can have coincidence. In the history, we have a lot of coincidence. The other cities are very, very far. So look, for instance, pottery. The oldest pottery in the Americas, you know where it was found, no?
I don't know.
In the Amazon, in the lower Amazon near Santarem, was the and she's we have dating of 7,000 years.
Hmm.
1,500 years after, we have some pottery apparent in along the Pacific coast in Ecuador, in Valdivia, also in Colombia, in the Caribbean coast. So we have occurrences of pottery in some places, but without contact. At a certain time in the development, people, they invent at this, more or less at the same time, 1,500 years after, the same technical innovation.
Okay.
So it's difficult for me to imagine that this city that was kind of isolated, they had contact with the Andes, they had contact with the south, but to the east,
Okay.
we didn't find any pottery of the Upano Valley, and to the north, we don't have contact. So they were not expansionists like us. Don't forget that most of the population today in the Amazon are animist. I'm not sure that they were animist in this city. They could have been more totemic. I don't know. It's difficult to say, but they were not expansionists.
Okay.
They were living in the perfect place, and they did use and looking at their their trade with other regions like the Andes. They didn't try to invade these territories. So I'm not sure that they were a model for other cities.
So they weren't very, maybe you could, were they not very militaristic? You don't find palisades, or do you find evidence of large scale violence?
No. The only violence are only some ditches, defensive ditches in the south of closing some site, two sites basically. But probably it's in the late times that they made that. We are thinking that this was not at the beginning, but at the end of the culture, probably with the first climatic stress that they got. Why I say that? Because we have a complete road system through all the valley. Very dense system with road perfectly straight during tens of kilometers through the forest. That is very difficult to do because they dug up to 5 meters deep the road. You don't need to do that. You don't need. Why do you?
Yeah.
Today you can walk. It's easy.
Yeah, and
easy.
for a jungle.
You don't need a road. So why they made dug straight road?
And it doesn't follow any contours. I think I remember seeing something about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just kind of goes
a perfect orientation, always the same through all the valleys. Orientation is not north; it's 60 degrees to the east, but it's orthogonal. All the like the cities, all the roads are straight and oriented, and other roads are crossing them in the same grid, exactly a perfect checkerboard organization. And I guess they didn't need such road, and we always, as European or North American, we are looking for an effective function for everything. Indigenous is not so important, this rentability of the landscape. It's more symbolic for them. And the symbol is first to make this road. How they did? They could do that. Probably they made this road like today indigenous people oriented their houses, their villages through the constellation, through the astronomical looking you can have a perfect. So anyway, in the rainforest, it's the only way to have a perfect line. So probably with this study with my colleague Antoine d'Horizon, the possibility of an orientation of the Orion constellation that is to the west.
Really?
So probably it's oriented through it's an important constellation for mythology, indigenous mythology.
Right.
During this last 2000 or perhaps more, 2 millennia, the last 2 millennia, we have this myth of the Orion constellation that is very important for up to now for indigenous. So probably to make the road, they did use the system, and to why they dug and they made straight road, probably to imprint in the soil, in the ground, symbolically, particular relationship with other villages, as they do still today in the Upper Shingu. They have very wide, up to 40 meters wide, of roads going to the other villages. Basically, it's not useful, but it's important because for a ceremony or to visit your partner, you imprint the relationship in the ground. And probably in the Upanos, they made the same. This can explain this obsession for the geometry that is useless for functional purpose.
For functional purposes. I want to talk a little bit more about that Orion and the constellation, because I had Richard Hansen on here and he studied El Mirador and Maya. And so the El Mirador, I guess, would be what I'm thinking is a better equivalent to the Sapano Valley site because it's a more of a early pre-classic Maya settlement. But he sees those three, they call them triadic mounds all across El Mirador in the LIDAR. Three mounds, and they call it triadic, and they attribute that to the three stars of Orion's belt.
Yeah,
so there is this.
The central one.
There is a tradition.
In Orion, you have seven stars.
There's seven stars, but in the belt, isn't there? There's three in the belt.
Yeah, belt, and the other one are four like that. And in South America, they are more interested by the four stars.
Really?
The four stars in the mythology are four monkeys. They were heroes when they were living in the earth, and they fight with their cousin. They kill their cousin. It's a very long list, but basically they kill their cousin, and the uncle came and cut the head and put the head on the four main posts of the house, and the head went to the sky and became stars. And this is for, I say, Orion constellation. In fact, for Indigenous, is the four monkeys constellation, the real name. Okay. So it's very important. And it's important, probably it's different from Mirador, because in fact, it's a very special constellation for Indigenous in the Amazon, because the constellation appear to the east in the morning, in the beginning of the night, and the course of the constellation is more or less along the Ecuador line and along the most of the river going from the Andes to the Atlantic. You see, so the course of the constellation is going, and in the morning the constellation is going in the sea, and to continue the course in the infra world. So it's a very important myth for origin myth for people living in the rainforest, especially in the upper Amazon. And we found with some friends, colleagues, some representation of this forehead cut on pottery of 2,000 years ago. Not in the Amazon, but in the Peruvian coast. So it seems that this myth was existing for at least 2,000 years.
Wow. That's it.
Imagine you read a book, Charlemagne book. 2 years after, you forget most of the book. But imagine that the only way to learn things, history, myth, is to listen people counting this, telling this myth. If you listen, like it's the case in the Amazon, each week, the same story during all your life, this story can pass from generation to generation during centuries. And we know now that this oral tradition can stay very strong because people, they listen the same story all their life. Sure, with the time you have some distortion, some variation, but basically the stories stay. For instance, the hero, the warriors at the beginning can be changed in jaguar or in turtle in a more recent version of the same myth. But the myth is the same. So it's a fascinating approach of the knowledge, indigenous knowledge. And in this case, interesting because it's about astronomy and how to conceive the sky. And anyway, the same way as Greek, remember, Heracles was killed. And after he became a constellation, he was an hero, a human hero that was killed by fire. And he went to the sky and became a constellation of Heracles. It's exactly the same story.
It's interesting. It does seem like people, well, there does seem to be a very strong relationship between ancient people and the sky. And I think we all have to remember in those times there's no light pollution too, because I'm here out in Honolulu and I look up at the sky and there's barely any stars. But if I go to another island where there's hardly any people, it's so vivid. And a lot of people don't even know what an unadulterated sky looks like. But clearly, it was very important to so many ancient societies to help explain their world, to explore their world, to align their world, mark holidays and everything. I think even in North America, at Cahokia, there's some evidence that Orion or that constellation had a big impact or has a correlation with the site there.
Yeah, I can even make a statement. I consider that it's very probable that the landscape, the modified anthropogenic landscape, was kind of a reproduction of the skyscape.
So say that again. What do you mean?
The landscape that modified by people, by indigenous people in the forest, could correspond, be a reproduction of the skyscape.
Yeah.
It's also a kind of landscape.
Yeah.
So probably there's reproduction on the direction, but also probably, as you say, in El Mirador, in the organization of the pyramids. So it's if you live in an indigenous village, they know perfectly the sky, the night skies. It's so crucial. They don't have, well, now they have, but they don't have screen.
Yeah.
The only screen that it is
when you're out there camping or out in the dark, or you've been out doing field work in the Andes, and all you have is the fire to look at or the sky.
You, look, Honolulu. You can go in the heat on five star. But if you go outside, you will have 5 million of star hotel.
It's amazing. It really is so cool. Now, for people that are listening, let's try to get some basics down if we're trying to imagine what this city would have looked like for a person walking through it. So we have really dense, we have urbanism streets. It's a grid-like pattern. You're finding hundreds, thousands of mounds. There's ditches with maize, which seems to be the most important, let's say, crop for feeding the people.
Yeah, but
and then and maybe you can add on to that. Would they have been wearing cotton clothing? What kind of clothing would they have been wearing? I know cotton was domesticated one place in South America. Could you speak on their clothes or anything like that?
In the Amazon, they don't have, they never domesticated any animals. Anyway, in the Americas, they domesticated very few animals. The llamas, what is the small rodent?
A guinea pig.
Yeah, guinea pig, dindon, the glue, in Mexico,
the turkey, yeah. Or you could say the Spanish word for it too. I'll be able to look it up.
It's a
Yeah,
French
Turkey.
funny name. Gluk, gluk, gluk. It's a name.
Is that the French name for Turkey?
No, it's one way.
Because they make that sound.
The nose.
Yeah, yeah.
I was looking even in French, looking after the name. And we have very few animals domesticated. What they made, they were living very close to animals. So they didn't have, the Upano Valley is 1,000 meters high above the sea level. So basically they could use like today, cotton clothes.
Dress. Yeah.
Like today, and we found in some excavation of Spidenwurfs. So we know that they did use Spidenwurfs is to
Oh, okay.
spin manufacture the cotton. So we're sure that they did use cotton. Probably the modern Iron Chicham people, they are called Iron Chicham. Before they were called Jivaro, but not anymore. Shua people, they have this dress, the woman, and the men they have a dress, but only with for the legs, because the night can be kind of cold. They make a fire at the foot of the bed, so they didn't need so much lot
Clothing.
of clothes.
Okay. That's interesting.
It's very hot anyway.
It's hot, so they really didn't need clothes, but they did have evidence for cotton because I think a lot of people aren't aware that, you know, pre-Columbian societies in South America were using cotton. They had cotton clothing. It wasn't just fiber, other plant fibers, or just leather clothing or things like that. So that's kind of interesting. And this Upano Valley is full of the dark earth. You mentioned the Terra Preta.
No. Terra Preta is along the Amazon River. We don't have Terra Preta in the. We suspect Terra Preta, but it's really difficult to be sure that it is Terra Preta, because I have black layers that can more correspond to ashes eruption. The volcano is 30 kilometers from the valley, north of the valley. Agricultural soil, this pedological process that puts the soil very dark. We are not sure. Still, we need to make some analysis to know what are these black layers. But they are probably not anthropogenic. Terra Preta, because we don't find in all of them a lot of pottery. In general, in most of the Terra Preta level, we have a lot of pottery because they correspond to the high occupation, dense occupation, and it's not the case in the valley. So they don't need even Terra Preta because, as I say, the soil is so fertile. So they just can cultivate directly in the valley.
And for those that aren't aware of what dark earth is or Terra Preta, in the Amazon is kind of counterintuitive, but it's a rainforest and it actually has very poor soils because the nutrients are. Yeah.
It's a legend.
You think that's a legend?
Yeah, they're not so poor.
They're not so.
They are sometimes very poor in some places, but not everywhere. It's to imagine that I say that, in US,
soils are poor. Yeah, that's a good point. It's such a vast area. But I guess so in the areas with bad, poor soil, which I think maybe the better way to say this would be for people that are not from the Amazon, the idea you would think is it's such this vast jungle, this lush jungle, that everywhere there must be like the most fertile soils. But actually in some places, because it's so hot and there's so much precipitation, the soils can be limited in some nutrients. And so they find these areas near indigenous settlements in the past where they'd built up these soils. They call them terra preta, dark earth, and they're not exactly sure how they made it, but it seems to be a mixture of burning, adding waste, like a household waste like sewage, and you're saying pottery, and it mixed together, and it actually makes these soils that remain fertile, that actually hold nutrients in them, even in these rainforest conditions over thousands of years, because today they're still finding these soils and they're everywhere. They're vast, extensive.
There's a discussion among the archaeologists to know if it's a voluntary or not production, human production. Personally, I think it's arrogant to think, oh, they didn't know that it was so fertile, so they saw that very late. We are European people. We have only 400 years of observation in the Amazon, more or less. Indigenous people, they are living in the Amazon for at least 30,000 years. They knew perfectly, and they know still perfectly what are the qualities and the problems in the rainforest. Much more than Earth, much more. I can cite tens of examples explaining how the adaptation. Only one, the manioc. It's a venom. It's a venom. If you eat manioc, the sweet manioc, no, but the what is the name of the other one? The most common is full of cyanure. You cannot eat, you have to extract the cyanure. And it's a long process to extract this. And to invent a process to extract the venom from a plant is a complicated science. And indigenous, they know that for years. I have a lot of examples how they use perfectly the landscape, animals, plants for their needs. So obviously, at the beginning, it was a natural conception, the Terra Preta. Very rapidly, they saw the advantage. Most of the Terra Preta they are not cultivated field, but they are archaeological sites where they were living. So probably they saw the advantage to have Terra Preta, and after they began to make Terra Preta, how they do? They sweep their village all the time. The
Waste.
the dirt is put at the foot of the trees, and the dirt, what it is? Charcoal, ashes, bones of the food, human production.
Yeah, night waste.
And all this, a lot of charcoal. So, and this is a perfect nutriment for agriculture. So they concentrate this nutriment still today in the garden, just to help for cultivation. So probably they saw the advantage, they did use, and they did provoke the Terra Preta in their village. Can you imagine a village of, let's say, 2,000, 10,000 inhabitants? They need to eat, so they have to find a solution. And what archaeology discovered this last decades, it's that we have not only slash and burn cultivation, but we have all kind of agroforestry, varroa culture, terra preta culture, raised fields culture, all kind of system that most of them disappear because agriculture, especially in the tropics, is difficult to find. I guess in Hawaii it must be the same, difficult to find some clue of millennium agriculture. So it's always difficult to see. And we began because archaeology changed a lot in the Amazon these last 2 decades with new methodology, interdisciplinary research with ecologists, paleobotanists, paleoclimatologists, all kind of. Today, at the difference of the 20th century, you cannot imagine scientific program, an archaeological program in the Amazon without a team of specialties. Nobody's working alone with his thrower, looking for shards. This is all time. Now we are working by teams of specialists, and it's so much productive to work like that.
Yeah, I agree.
Because it's difficult to find some data about the past. Now there is a new orientation for few years. Indigenous people, they participate to many programs, archaeological programs, and some of them, they follow some university studies. They get their master, they get their PhD, and now they are researchers. But they have, with their own knowledge, they have other view about the past. It's archaeology in the Amazon is changing because it's more participative now than before. And there's a lot of advance in this archaeology today. So it's a fascinating time to see the evolution development of the Amazonian archaeology today.
Definitely is. I'm fascinated with what they're finding. Speaking of interdisciplinary, let's get back to this collapse idea. I know that can be a sensitive word sometimes, but you mentioned 600 AD or 600 CE Common Era is around the time that this valley is abandoned, disintegrates, collapse, people leave, etc. You mentioned one idea could be a drought related. I'm thinking there's a volcano nearby. Is there any evidence for volcanic eruption? And can you put forth any speculation on top of climate or elaborate on climate for the reasons why you think the valley was abandoned?
Of course, the first option generally for an abandonment is to a war. We have no traces of war or no war today.
Evidence.
No evidence. So perhaps we don't see nothing. The second one, obviously, was when I began to excavate there 30 years ago. You have to know that the Shanghai volcano is one of the most active in South America. So it's always you have ashes, and sometimes eruption. So, and very few studies by volcanologists. So I work with a volcanologist. And because I did suppose that it was possible that a mega eruption over all the valley, during years I was, because pedological studies shown that the black soil were full of ashes, but at the same time it's logical.
Yeah, it should be covered in ash.
Aware. So that I was thinking, and because I have black layers above the inner habitation soil, so probably can explain in my stratigraphy, I have a scenario clear of black layer on the occupation level. So I did the end of the society and black layer. So it was logical to think about volcano. And working with a volcanologist, I don't trust this anymore. And I say it in my paper, in our paper in Science, because we have no evidence. And I make datings of many black layers, and we don't have a mega eruption. We have dating from 4,000 up to now. So they are not mega eruption of the volcanoes. I left this possibility. So the third possibility for such an abandonment so quick, because from 600 nothing, it can be a crisis, a climatic crisis, like we know other one in the Amazon. In very few years, in less than 1 century, everybody went because they could not eat anymore.
This corresponds with the classic 600s around where the pre-classic classic Maya boundary.
Yeah, Maya is 900.
The classic Maya, right?
Yeah, but the dating are not the same in Mexico, in America, and South America. Also, we saw the change in climate in South America around 600.
Around 600. What record is that? Are you? I'm a paleoclimate person.
Yeah.
Is it like the ice core from what's the name of the?
No, it's not ice core. It's from the Andes. You have one in Peru. There are two in Peru, two samples in Peru, and around. I can send to.
Oh, it's Pumacocha with Broxton Bird.
Yeah, Pumacocha.
Oh yeah, and Broxton was a older PhD student when I was starting at the same. We had the same advisor. So that's a high res oxygen isotope record. So Pumacocha shows changes. It's around 600.
Yeah.
Interesting. And what is now that's kind of bothering me? What is the name? I know the name of the ice. What's the name of the ice cap on the Andes that's melting? They have.
I'm very bad for names, so I have to check all the time. I have a paper that I participate to a team working on climatic change around 1,000, 1,200 through the Amazon, and we use 6 samples, 6 core with paleo
Calcaya, the Calcaya ice cap. I don't know if it may span the last 2,000 years, but that's a high res record, I believe, that would tell you something about.
I can say to you, but we are not speaking because it's not in the timings that we had. What is interesting is between 1,000 and 1,300, we have events, cultural events through all the Amazon.
Okay.
And we have 6 regions that we studied with the local archaeologists, and 6 core from Venezuela, Brazil, Peru, and they all show that big drought through the Amazon at this time, very dry climate, and probably the most stable, the strongest society collapsed at this time. And the what we call groups from the forest, they survive better with such a stress. So this is the conclusion of the paper published 5 years ago. But we didn't have interest for the 600. At this time, I was sure that a volcanic explanation, so I didn't look for climatic changes at this time. It's recently when I began to look for climate that we have answer for us about the late times before the conquest before the European reached the Amazon, the indigenous cultural map began to change because of these events, climatic events through the Amazon.
Interesting.
So the change was not so strong that with the disease from Europe, but cultural change was began between 13th and 14th century. And what is interesting about this drought through the Amazon, we work with indigenous from French Guiana, and they have a myth explaining a period without water and people dying because missing of. He said the indigenous said it was before the white people arriving. So it corresponds more or less with the archaeological data that we have and with the paleoclimatical data that we have. So we have a connection because between different sources. It's fascinating and the participation of indigenous people to scientific project is very interesting. It's opened our mind to another way to write the story, the history of the past. So, and many archaeologists in the Amazon now are working with indigenous to open their mind.
We're finding these oral histories can go back pretty far, and and there's information in there that's accurate. Now, when you're, maybe an archaeologist is listening to this, or a social scientist, or maybe your arch nemesis academically, and they're thinking, Stéphen, you're making this environmentally deterministic argument that climate is somehow, it's the causative factor of this decline, and people can react to environmental changes in so many different ways. But I want to also remind everyone, and as you mentioned, and I've looked into this doing paleoclimate work in North America and studying the late woodland cultures there that grew maize as well. People don't understand, if your society runs on maize, or it's a vital component of your overall diet, when maize sets its tassels, this is something that the agriculture literature you could get into the details of maize generating kernels. When it puts those little tassels out to be pollinated, it is a small window. It's like a 2-3 week window. And if there is stress on the corn during that narrow window, and in the cultures in North America, you can only get one season of maize, which is July and June when it sets, or around, July. Just that window, if it's dry, all of a sudden the corn may not die, but it doesn't produce any kernels. All of a sudden it becomes half full of corn kernels or less. And therefore your plants may also be stunted, but you go to pull the corn off, there's no kernels in there. and you all of a sudden your production can go down. Not to mention you could just have dead maize plants, but overall maize is pretty hardy because it's a C4 plant in terms of being hardy with dryness. But it's that window of setting and pollination of the tassels that come out of the thing of the cob. If it has any stress, then all of a sudden the amount of calories you generate from your corn goes way down. That I think is the link. There's like the causative link between a maize dependent society and climate. It's literally, you can graph it. It's like it's amazing that you can even, I've seen papers where they look at moisture availability during the setting of the cob and then production per acre of corn. It's correlated. So there's no doubt there could be a link between climate and a society that's heavily dependent on maize. Therefore, in those cases, I think making an environmentally deterministic argument makes sense logically.
Especially if you look today, for instance, some mega Nino events, like into 2023 in the Amazon. The people, they die. The thousands of fishes die. If you have one drought 1 year, the second one the year after, and the third one, villages, they die. It is the same during it's not to be deterministic to see the effect is today. Look, the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, the people, the indigenous, what they did, they did the same that in USA. They closed their villages, they isolated them, forbidden to everybody to enter, and they ask to shaman to help them. They do what they have to do. Probably those zones were existing before the European arrival, and that to react is not to be deterministic that villages can disappear because of disease and things like that. And strong climatic events is look today everywhere. We have problems in front of climatic change. Too much water also is bad. And now with the Nino, the Nino phenomena is stronger than before. So during the what they call the Nina event, more rain, more than before, and during the Nino event, more drought, strongest. And I see for now 40 years that I lived 20 years in South America, and I saw that the climatic events are always stronger and stronger. And look at the Amazon; it's incredible. I was looking today a picture of a dry river, no water at all. So this kind of event has consequences. We cannot deny that. And because we have some data, paleoclimatic. I cannot prove everything because very few excavations were made in the Upano Valley. In fact, I made most of the excavation in the Upano Valley. There's a priest who made some excavation in the 1980s, and me and some Ecuadorian archaeologists, but they just made test pits, so very, very small windows. And generally, I working by large-scale excavation. So I open big pits to see the organization of the remains. But in fact, very few archaeologists did visit the Upano Valley. We have very few data. Look in the literature, you will see almost nothing. We are at the beginning. It's a fascinating place, but we are just at the beginning of the exploitation of the archaeological archives of the Upano Valley. I guess we will find more and more. But we have some clue for the end of probably, I consider the most probable for the end of the Upano culture now could be climatic and probably provoking some conflict between people. For that reason, we have some ditches, defensive ditches around some cities. So same kind of phenomena that in Maya lands and Rome and because there is another explanation. It's the inner cause, social cause also can be provoking the collapse of a society. But this is much more difficult to prove. Or you can imagine that they begin to fight between the cities. This can be, but why? Climatic reason can be a good factor to explain social stress, social conflicts. So, but still, we are at the beginning of the study, and I hope that in the next few years, some archaeologists will work in the valley. I worked during 30 years in the valley, and I excavate during 7 years. So I think other can work now to
work. So
yeah.
hopefully this conversation will inspire some young archaeologists to want to work there.
Continue, yeah.
Continue. And that's kind of the point of this channel, is to interview scientists like yourself that are doing amazing work. I mean, you're working on a lost Amazon city, maybe the oldest urbanism in the Amazon, and you need to get your voice on the internet so that people can see and hear about your work and see you, because we're writing these papers, but we're lucky if our colleagues read our papers. And other than that, you may get somebody that reads the title from the press release and a few people that read the press release. But we really need to, I think, as scientists, scientific community, we need to make sure that we communicate in the most modern way. And I think part of that is things like podcasts, YouTube channels, and where anybody can tune in from the public to hear what you have to say.
I published many books. I did publish a lot of books, and not on the subject, only one on the Upano, but I will do other books and papers, a lot of papers for academic papers, but also large public papers. And I make a lot of conferences, exhibitions. So I try to communicate, but and I made also movies on the Amazon. So 3 movies. So
To look that up.
So I try to communicate. I think it's important because many scientists, they stay in the ivory tower.
And they don't want to talk.
I go to the macadam.
That's great. And I also wanted to say, I don't know if you did it on purpose, but your Aloha shirt, or as they say in the mainland, your Hawaiian shirt I love it. Did you wear that?
Thank you.
Wear that because you're talking to me?
I have always a Hawaiian shirt. I have a lot of Hawaiian shirts. I prefer a color because I live so much time in Latin America. Basically, I love color. You know, in France, look at the street, it's gray. Between maroon, dark blue, black. People, they are so sad with their color. I have a picture of the Zocalo in Mexico. I was in a hotel on the Zocalo, and I saw it was just color. People, they have color, and I like that. So, but my favorite, I don't know anymore. It's come on, what is the name? The most famous Hawaiian shirt. I had one when I was in Hawaii of Magnum.
Oh yeah, the PI. I can't.
I could buy one when I was in Hawaii. You see with parrots. It's red, also parrots and leaves.
Yeah. You've been out here before, out to.
I was 10 years ago doing the SA Congress.
Okay. Nice. So you definitely you were probably in Honolulu at the convention center.
Yeah.
I'm pretty close. I work at University of Hawaii at Manoa, so right up the street.
I did like so much the museum that you have. What is the name of a famous historian? Where it's a very old-fashioned, and on the first you have a small room with all the queen of Hawaii, and the first queen is very indigenous, and slowly and slowly you see the introduction of English.
European, yeah.
At the end, I remember at the entrance you have a big statue of ant.
Of an ant?
Yeah,
Is this the Bishop Museum, or it could be?
Yeah, Bishop.
That
Yeah.
sounds like the Bishop. Okay. Because otherwise, I was going to say it sounds like the Iolani Palace. So one of the only monarchy palace on U.S. territory is in Hawaii, and it's the Hawaiian monarchy.
No, I did. I was not so fun because we were in the Eton. I remember one day waiting for a taxi, a cab to go to the airport. I sit on a rock. It was a plastic rock.
Oh, yeah.
You are in Hawaii, in a volcanic island. There are rocks everywhere, pyroclastic rocks.
Yeah.
And you have a pure plastic.
Yeah, you just having a pure plastic.
It's how it's possible. I took the flight to go to Vancouver, where I had another congress. So Vancouver is Vancouver, and walking in the street on the grass, it was beautiful on the grass. And it was the grass. Wow, it was plastic grass. Wow.
Yeah, certain places they have plastic. They have like turf. It can be so dry sometimes that grass doesn't grow well without irrigation, so it'll just be dirt or turf. I'm born in the U.S. I was born in Pennsylvania, so the East Coast, and I've been moving west since I finished my PhD from the University of Pittsburgh, and now
you live in.
now I live in Honolulu, and I've been here 4 years, over 4 years now.
You like it?
I love it. I love it here. The weather's amazing. It's food's awesome. Beautiful scenery. And if you don't mind traveling to the mainland often, it's not a bad place to live. I don't get island fever in Honolulu because it's such a big city for me that I feel like I have plenty to do. Some of the other islands though could be maybe a little tough for me and other people because there's just not that much going on in terms of cities, I guess, or people. We are in the middle of the Pacific. Sometimes I forget about that. We're really out in the middle of the Pacific. So, but I want to end this conversation with a reminder. In the beginning, I didn't mention where you actually worked, but I just again want to thank you, Stéphen Rostain, for coming on to talk about your new paper, 2,000 Years of Garden Urbanism in the Upper Amazon, published in 2024. You are the director of France's National Center for Scientific Research?
No, I'm senior researcher.
You're a senior
We say director of research. So I made a bad translation. It's a senior researcher. And in the National Center for Scientific Research, it's what you call in USA a dream job.
Sounds like.
You do what you want.
Wow.
You have not really a boss, but in your house, in the office, and you do what you want. You can make research. It's a very big institute. It's like 32,000 people working in the, but not only in archaeology, also in botanic and volcanology, medicine, law. It's all kind of fields in the research. I think that we are like 400 archaeologists working there. It's really a dream job to work in such conditions. We don't have to teach. We teach because we want. We can organize our career as more or less as we want. I'm very happy to do that. For that reason, I came back from South America. Because like you, I did like so much to live there in South America. But when they offer to you such a job, you have only one answer. Yes.
Wonderful. Thanks again.
See you later, alligator.
See you later.